Let's get into our first debate, though. Is 16 too young to vote? 0207 862 2222. The government has confirmed that 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to vote in the next general election. The Prime Minister said they're old enough to pay taxes, so they should get a say in how the country's run. What else are they old enough to do or not to do? Let us just take a look at some... we'll create some AI 16-year-olds, shall we, here on the screen. All very easy to do. And yes, a large number of people in this country will be able to vote at the next election. Are they men and women, these young people? There's the question. Are they old enough, or are they boys and girls? That's the question. So that's the key definition. We should have a look. Let's just take, if we can, zero in on a group of 16-year-olds here. And let's see what it is that you can do when you're 16 already that you can't do when you're 15, 14, and so on. So the sign that these are men, young men and women, where would we start if we were looking at that? So the first thing to say is you can have sex legally at 16 and above. You can also, by the way, wedding veil is there because with your parents' permission, you can also get married at 16. You can leave home at 16. There's been a bit of back and forwards on lottery tickets. You used to be not allowed to, then you were, then you're not allowed to. You can change your name by default. You can drive a tractor or a moped. You can order champagne, beer, wine, whatever, in a pub with adults, so long as it's with food. You can elect to have a serious medical procedure. You can join the army with your parents' permission. And you can also, because you can work, you can also join a trade union as well. And the handcuffs are there because actually if you commit a serious crime, you will be tried as if you are an adult. So that's a big part of it. So from that point of view, it does look, doesn't it, as if they are men and women. They're young men and women, and therefore it absolutely follows that you should be allowing 16-year-olds to vote in the next general election. But of course, there's another side to this. There are things that you can't currently do at 16 that you can at 18. And these have been quoted in the last 24 hours as a way of saying you shouldn't be voting. Things you can't do at 16, but you can at 18. Well, until Labour change it, the big one, obviously, is that you can't vote at 16. So we should put that in. That's going to change. But what else? I'll tell you one, interesting one. You can't get called up and serve on a jury at 16, but you can at 18. You can't stand for Parliament at 16. You can at 18. You can't buy yourself tobacco or alcohol or buy a vape at 16. You can't buy a knife at 16. You can't elect to get tattooed. There's a big sleeve tattoo there. You can't go into a betting shop and gamble at 16. You can't get a credit card at 16. There's a hell of a lot of stuff you can't do. You can't buy fireworks at 16. So there are lots of reasons. I don't know what, there are lots of reasons you can say they're still boys and girls. There are lots of reasons you can say, Joanna, they're men and women. What do you think?
I've got a 16-year-old, and I asked her what she thought about getting the vote at 16. And her response was that we are obviously educated, but we're not necessarily clear-sighted. I'm going to quote from her exactly. She said, although it's only a few, roughly 3%, 1.6 million, it can change the dynamic of the country without them not necessarily understanding the effects of voting and the impact it has. Young voters have always been more left in their leaning, but the irony is it might backfire now. Now, I'm sure Bobby's going to say, wow, she's 16, she's pretty eloquent.
She sounds like she should be voting.
She just says, I'm way too young to be able to make a decision like that. And I love that self-awareness, and that's got to be celebrated. But I am kind of with her, because one minute we're having that, and then the next minute we're having a hissy fit about something. I think we're asking too much of our children now. I think we really are. They've been fast-tracked with social media. They've been fast-tracked with drama all over the place. They're on screens the entire time. What is actually make-believe seems to be reality.
Yeah, what is childhood? It's true, you are bringing an end to childhood here, Bobby, if you let them vote.
I think sometimes you have to see the world the way it is rather than the way you think it should be. And if you look at the sweep of political history of the past 120 years, we've had greater political enfranchisement for women. So I think in 1918, women above a certain age, above 30, and with property rights were allowed to vote. And I think in 1928, it was equalized to the same level as men's at age of 21. And if you look at young people now in this country who are 16, they can go and get a job, they will pay taxes, they can serve in the military forces. And I think especially if you can you're in a position where you can pay taxes, you should have the right to dictate where those taxes end up. And I think when we talk about the protection, there are certain things that they can't, like gamble or drink. That's because we as a society say, actually, we're going to protect them for these things because they need to be a bit older and wiser. But I think young people now, especially even compared to 10, 15 years ago, they're so much more worldly wise. Of course, children, like anyone, like adults, we can make silly decisions. But young people, because of technology and social media, they're much more aware. They're much more politically
and also,
aware.
isn't it, Joanna, about the fact your lovely daughter has, let's say there was another big vote like Brexit. She's got far more at stake at 16 than an 86-year-old has. And with all respect to our 86-year-olds who are voting, there have been arguments that if you shouldn't be allowed to vote for something which is going to happen after you're dead.
I think that's absolutely got some credit. But what's interesting is when my 19-year-old voted in the last election, we actually went through an exercise of looking at all of our potential MPs in our area and analysing them all. So we made it this huge response to her having this privilege of being able to vote. But I strongly suspect that not many people go down that route. But ultimately, she voted as I did. And I think that is what we're going to see.
I see.
Is that you'll just vote as your parents. You'll say, oh, mum, dad, who are you voting for?
But surely the point about being 16 is you do the opposite of what your parents do.
Well, I don't know. I think there is this absolutely understanding. This is quite a crucial responsibility that you have, and you don't want to get it wrong. Yeah. However, there is some irony about this because when children were asked who they would vote for, I seem to think it was Jeremy Corbyn who came out top.
Of course.
So there is this sort of.
But that's exactly as we'd expect, isn't it? I mean, you go. I remember Corbyn coming on at Glastonbury. I thought this guy's going to win the election. The whole place, it went as crazy for Corbyn as it did for Attenborough. But that's his constituency, and the young will go. I think they may not like Keir Starmer. I think they'll try to go for the left of Labour. So maybe this new Corbyn party will be the one. Derek in Derbyshire, should 16-year-olds get the vote?
Yes, they should, and I'll tell you why. At 15 in 1951. I went down a coal mine as a lad, straight from school, and came up as a man because I had to take responsibility for myself and everybody else that worked under there in the coal mine at 15, not 16.
Amazing.
I have 4 grandchildren, and all of them were capable, in my opinion, to vote at 16.
Yeah, you raise a very good point. You're going back there to maybe the 50s, and it's we didn't live as long. If I was around in 1900,
90 next.
Say again.
I'm 90 next.
90. So
Yes.
he was 15, 75 years ago. So you were 1950. There we go. And people didn't live as long. So by the time you were 15, you were almost halfway through your life. I mean, I think it was a different time, Derek. Maybe these days.
No. I'm no different at 50. I'm no different at 15. Any other 15-year-old today, surely.
Really? I don't know. I think as you say, you were a man by 15. I don't know if that's true. Well, Bobby can tell us. He's a teacher.
But again, as a teacher, what I've seen, I've been a class teacher now for 11 years. Children now entering secondary at 11, and by the time, so I've seen children go from 11 to 16. I think children that are 15, 16 are much more politically astute. Social media, they do watch their funny cat videos and stuff, but they also see content about politics and the country and the direction it's heading, and they do have strong views. Not always the views that the government may want, like they're not all necessarily centre-left. In fact, I find sometimes young men, boys, they can be drawn to the arguments of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, but that's fine. But I feel as if young people definitely do have a view on society.
Yeah,
much more
interesting. No, and it's right. I'm going back to that old stereotype of thinking that young 16-year-olds tend to be left-wing, because somebody once said a conservative is just a liberal who's been mugged. And people start liberal and then something happens and they become conservative. But that may be completely wrong. Maybe they're all going to vote for Nigel Farage. I don't know. I mean, I think what's got them into politics is populism, because for all that it's problematic, Trump is a very interesting figure. Boris Johnson was very interesting. And it's like watching a movie. I mean, my kids were very small. Boris Johnson was campaigning to be mayor of London. He was doing something about getting shopping trolleys out of rivers. And when he did the press conference, he fell in the river. and my kids were 5 and 7. They thought it was hilarious. Thank you, Derek. Pete in Lincolnshire. Hi.
Hello, panel, and hello, you.
Hello.
No, they shouldn't be allowed for the simple reason being the government tell them in one aspect, I say little fibs. They say, yes, they can join the forces. Yes, they can, but they cannot go to fight. And two, if those 16 and 17-year-olds go to work and they're on minimum wage, if they do a 32-hour week, they are not in the tax bracket. So how are they going to claim all this tax from all these people?
I think that's a very good point, Pete, because the idea that they can pay tax so they should vote, what I think they will do is vote for taxes to be increased on everyone else. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to see the autumn statement. We're going to find that taxes are increased on absolutely everybody else because we simply don't have the money in the coffers. I'm agreeing with you, Pete, but the other thing as well is, going back to the point earlier, we have moved on, and there's new figures out now saying that there are more Brits, UK young, applying for university now. So we've just got a different way of addressing things. There are more jobs available. The marketplace has changed. And so children want to carry on with their education because there are greater opportunities or perceived greater opportunities by doing that. And I think that, everything has changed a lot. And I worry, I also think that their watching television habits are completely different from ours. We will watch the news, we will watch terrestrial television, well, they will just watch snips and snaps of different suppliers. It's not like they're listening to the radio so they can hear what's happening in the news. They're listening to pre-done soundtracks. Their habits about getting this information are totally different from ours.
Yeah. OK, Pete, thank you. After the break, we'll take more of your calls. We still are really in a bit of confusion about whether 16-year-olds are young men and women. Brian in Newport. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
How are you today, Brian?
Yeah, not too bad. I don't think they should be allowed to vote because if you're allowed to vote and change the course of the country, then you should be treated the same in a court of law. But at the minute, you can't be named, you can't be judged and singed as a 18-year-old when they class you as a man. But then the government is saying, yeah, but you can change the course of the country.
Well, the graphic I did, so Brian, I think you are tried as an adult when you're 16 in most situations, but it may well be the case that if a 16, 17-year-old commits a crime, the judge does have the discretion to say, we are not giving this person's name. You're quite right. Whereas an 18-year-old will always be named.
With Rudy McCann, whatever that guy's name was. For the
Axel Rudicabana.
Yeah. Now, he wasn't, they said certain things couldn't apply to him because he wasn't 18, even though he was just under 18.
Yeah, OK.
Now, that's the things I'm saying about. Now, if you're of age and you're of sound mind to vote and change the course of the country, then you've got to be treated across the board the same.
Well,
you can't be...
When those 10-year-olds killed James Bulger, they were tried, virtually as if they were out. They were tried for murder and convicted. And so I always think that, my goodness, the age of criminal responsibility in this country is very low.
Is it 10, yeah?
Well, I think 10 is the point at which it starts. But, we'll then find there's some terrible crime by a 9-year-old and they'll bring it a year lower. Brian, thank you. It just shows it's a grey area, which is why it's so interesting to talk about. Kathy in Cheshire, hi.
No, I don't want 16-year-olds to have a vote. The danger comes from the ones who are intelligent. They have absorbent young minds and they lap up information. You don't go back very far to the Hitler Youth, and ISIS in our own time had a effect.
Well, Hitler had a grown-up army as well, as it wasn't just the Hitler Youth.
Well, no, but I'm just showing if you've got bands of young people all chanting. The Hitler Youth, ISIS, Mao's Red Guards, and we saw just a week ago charismatic showmen leading on a field of braying donkeys chanting at Glastonbury. You get people like that, and it isn't the people at the lower end who are the danger. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I hear you, but to go from the Hitler Youth to Glastonbury, and to throw in a
I'm
donkey.
just showing. No, I'm showing a range. That's why I wanted to mention all different things. So I'm
No,
not
I know. And
just
listen,
on one
I think you're
political
raising a
viewpoint.
fascinating point.
Yeah, but the point, if you just let me say, further down in society, there's a cautious wisdom in the old and bottom of the class type people, because you get that from being sat on that many times through life. You get that. Now, a young person doesn't have that. The teacher tells them things, they absorb it, and they don't realise they are having their minds formed.
Yeah. What
I've
about
changed
the idea,
my mind
Kathy?
completely.
I know. Listen, fascinating. What about the idea, though, that if someone is 85 and we had another Brexit vote, they shouldn't be voting, because you shouldn't be voting for something you're not going to live to see?
Well, again, my argument is just what I've just said. When you're 85, I do think if you can't get down there and somebody else is voting for you, you do think, well, you're not really thinking for yourself. But there is a wisdom in old people. You've had the dirty done on you that many times that there's a wisdom. Now, a young person who's top of the class and the teacher's pet and all this, they do not have that filter.
Let's bring in the teacher here. Bobby, this is fantastic logic. That I can't argue.
The other thing is, if we extend Kathy's argument in terms of the wisdom, then we need to make sure we assess the wisdom of everyone at the ballot box. So only if you meet a certain level of intelligence or knowledge about politics.
Well, you can't do that, can you? Because that's basically fascism.
And exactly. So I think the reverse there. If we want to enfranchise more people, young people at 16, they can work.
At what point would you stop people voting? Would you allow them to vote at 8?
I think 16 is a reasonable point, because that's the point in which we allow people to leave the school system. If they want to get a job, they are. If we suddenly move that to 14, but I think 16 is like again, there is precedent in Scotland and Wales for local elections. They allow young people 16, 17 to vote.
Yeah.
And in fact, what they found is 16 to 17-year-olds voted a higher percentage compared to 18 to 24-years. Actually, they're even more enfranchised at that age compared to people slightly older.
I think maybe you tend to vote when it's your first election. That's probably the answer, because
I think there's enthusiasm because you've got it. The other point, actually, that Kathy made is, an 86-year-old with wisdom. But isn't it true that from about the age of 75 onwards, you start to lose your mental capacity to some means, shape or form?
Wow.
And it said that your ability to make a decision depreciates, and it's just your brain's packing up and starting to. So it does go back to that stage, if you start at 16, do you have to have an end date? And your point about, if you're 86, chances are you're not going to see it through. You may or you may not.
I don't know, I feel bad saying that, because in the end you've paid a lot of tax if you're 86, but it's... this is not for me to comment on whether Brexit's been a great success or a great failure, or whether we don't know yet. What we do know, I think, is that if 16-year-olds had been allowed to vote in that referendum, they would have tended to go more towards Remain, and that would have made the difference and we would have stayed. And then you can argue that we wouldn't have some of the problems we got now. But we're getting on to talk about Brexit shortly. Andrew is in the Rhondda. Hello, Andrew.
Hello there. I'm not in the Rhondda. I'm in Bargoed, which is the other valley over the Rhymney Valley.
Is it what they call Rhondda Sinon Taff?
No, I'm in the Rhymney Valley.
Not there either. OK, what would you like to say?
Well, the arguments put against voting for 16-year-olds seem to be the same argument they had many decades ago about giving the women the vote.
Yes.
And they treated the women like second-class citizens. And we seem to be classing the 16-year-olds as second-class citizens by not giving them the vote. Yeah,
it's funny when you look back at the political cartoons of the day, which were all mocking women who were campaigning for the vote. They were really horrible. They were really nasty about the way they drew women and made them look like witches.
I even found out last week the word suffragette was meant to be a term of mocking and derision, and the suffragists formed them. They gave that name as a sort of opposite version of that.
Yes, I can't remember where it comes from. Suffragette. I think
it was a newspaper.
Oh, okay. But there is a difference, isn't there, Andrew? Because we're not going to have a 16-year-old throwing himself under the king's horse to try and get the vote. They're in a different category in a way.
Well, that's right. But also, it's the right-wing media who got this idea that they could be all left.
Yeah.
Well, they had the same idea in those days, where they thought the women would be the left of the politics of that time.
Yes, no, I think you're absolutely right to say that. We sort of guess these things. We may be totally wrong. They may all vote for Farage.
Well, according to a survey from ITV, the people that actually they really like are Greta Thunberg, the YouTuber Mr. Beast, and Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah, and Corbyn, I guess. I think you're right. I think they... but then that is...
Corbyn does come out on top.
He does come out.
Followed by Nigel Farage, Kemi, then Ed Davey.
Where's Starmer?
Oh, Starmer's number 2.
Number 2? I find that surprising.
No, hold on. No, Starmer's
the...
number 1, but Corbyn seems to be the most popular.
But that was, I think that
politician.
survey was done before Labour got elected, so
yeah.
that may have changed. OK, Andrew, thank you. Well, I think it is happening, this 16-year-old voting. Later we'll be asking...